afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to the third technical workshop, Emerging Technology in Video Production, the last of the webinars in the Video Production Tools module. Brought to you by the Digital Empowerment for Small Museums Project, a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations and dedicated to providing free, self-paced training resources for small museums. This inaugural series of online trainings focuses on digital media and technology topics, and it is made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. My name is Avery Shaughnessy Comfort. My pronouns are she, her, and I am your host for today's program. My visual description is as follows. I am a white female with short, brown, wavy hair, wearing red, square-shaped glasses, and a purple quarter sleeve top. I'm located in my home office, and behind me are 2 windows, an off-white wall, and a bookcase housing various knickknacks. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute for our physical sense of place, it is important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the Indigenous people who have called it home. I'm speaking to you today from my home office in Erie, Pennsylvania, the historical homelands of the Erie and Seneca peoples. Wherever each of us are located, let us acknowledge all Indigenous nations as living communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. We, the Digital Empowerment for Small Museums Project, recognize that our organizations and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society which perpetuated the exclusions and erasures of many Native peoples throughout the United States and beyond. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. We have Michael Owen, principal at Media Combo, located in Brooklyn, New York. Michael Owen is co-founder of Media Combo, a digital media studio, with his partner Robin White Owen. He has developed AR and VR experiences for the Morgan Library and Museum, the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. In 2016, he went to Lake Baikal in Siberia to create 3 Google expeditions. He also produced an impressionistic VR film about the lake and has used the project to demonstrate a finalist concept for the 2020 XR for Good Alcove competition. Owen has also produced documentaries, music videos, TV commercials, exhibition programs, and video art for over 30 years. Today, Michael will talk about new and emerging video formats, tools, and platforms such as 360, volumetric video, and virtual tour services. He will include examples of recent video work in museums with small production teams and discuss considerations in planning for the future scalability and sustainability of a museum's video production tools. So let's please give Michael a big welcome, and let's get ready to begin. So Michael, feel free to take it away whenever you are ready.
Hello. So let me find. So thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Michael Owen, a white male in my 60s with graying brown hair, wearing black eyeglasses, and a black and white patterned shirt with a neutral background behind me. I'm joining you via video conference from Brooklyn, New York, the ancestral land of the Lenni Lenape people. So, why am I here? I want to speak with you about the ways museum professionals can use video and other new technologies to make museum content available to broader audiences. My partner at Media Combo and I have been producing interpretive content for museums for over 30 years. Initially, it was just linear video introductions to exhibitions or contextual information about specific objects. As technology evolved over the years, our clients' requirements and our capabilities evolved to include interactive kiosks, websites, video walls, and in the past 6 years, immersive media applications, including virtual tours and experiences. So why should museums care about virtual tours? Museums are trusted spaces, and can play an important role in their communities, not just as repositories of history, culture, information, and learning, but also as a safe place where people can socialize and exchange ideas around common interests. The events of the past year and a half have demonstrated how fragile the fabric of our society is. How many communities are underserved and don't have access to museums, but also how have the tech but also how the technology that facilitates distance learning and collaboration has evolved and has been broadly accepted by the public. We are at an inflection point where museums can think beyond their walls to increase their audience and their geographical reach beyond their immediate communities. Most exhibitions are the result of hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of labor and often extremely large sums of money. They are up for a few months and then they are gone. We have the technology to preserve them. The four examples that I'm going to show today are of existing technologies that can be utilized to preserve. How do I do this? Okay. Sorry about that. For some reason, not advancing the slides. Let me get back to what I was saying. The four examples I'm going to demonstrate today are existing technologies that can be utilized to extend museum reach. And the last two are tools that can be used to virtually preserve exhibitions and objects either as historical record or the way to make them available in new ways without geographical restrictions. The first piece I want to show is
Michael, you might just reshare it again and we'll put it back up there. That's okay.
Okay. So the first thing I want to show today is a silent video tour that utilizes Instagram Live to give visitors virtually a tour of, in this case, the Broad Museum. Heidi Quicksilver, Director of Technology at the Broad in Los Angeles, developed an extremely simple but elegant virtual tour solution for giving public access to galleries when museums in LA were shut down due to the pandemic. A digital team member pushes a camera, in this case an iPhone mounted on a wheeled tripod with a stabilized head. The tours are streamed on Instagram Live. They last from 10 to 20 minutes. The Jeff Koons tour you will see a brief clip of is 10 minutes long with 5 featured artworks. And the audience numbers are usually 100 to 150 viewers for the entire tour, but they've had peaks of 500 to 800 people depending on the content. And the Jean-Michel Basquiat galleries were the biggest numbers. So here, we'll play you a clip from the Jeff Koons exhibition. It's so minimal, but it's sort of really quite elegant and mesmerizing, and I'm a nice way to show off your collection. The tour basically takes you through several objects, and they highlight 5 specific works of art with captions. And the caption artwork is loaded onto the phone. And so when it's streaming using the Instagram Live controls, they're able to switch between the live video and the captions. at the appropriate point in time. So anyway, the next thing I'd like to show are the Google Street View tours. Now, anyone can submit photograph and 360 Street View panoramas to Google Maps. Once they're accepted, the destination becomes searchable in Google, and the results link to the tour in Maps. This is mostly used for retail destinations, but it's an innovative and relatively inexpensive way to make your physical space known to someone unfamiliar with your institution, either locally or anywhere in the world, depending on how you load in the search criteria. And you can do this yourself. And there are many companies and individuals that offer this service. But the two examples we're showing today are by Caden Media, based in Toronto, that has a network of photographers around the country, and I believe in some other countries as well. And they produce the two examples I'm about to show you. And this is where I'd like Nancy to take over for the first street view. Do I need to stop sharing?
Nope.
Okay.
Keep sharing. We've got it on screen.
All right, great. So this is a gallery, I believe, in Toronto. And basically, if we just move forward here, great. It just gives you an idea of how you can capture the space, look at the art, at what's in there, and give a sense of what the destination is like. A simple tour like this can be done for about $500, including, all of the sort of bureaucracy of posting it into the Google Maps system. You can go further and add hotspots and all other kinds of things like that. Obviously, the cost increases. We will have links to sample pricing. I think that's all we need to show of this space. Let's move on to the next. Here is the Peel Center in Baltimore. Again, I think a very nice job was done to show how this space works and give you a sense of what this particular installation was like. It's also a record of what this exhibit was like. Now, the one thing I will say is, and this is, I think, a really great way to show off a particular exhibition, and it extends throughout the entire house. But Street View is, the one thing I will say is, you're putting your work in the hands of Google. Google has dropped initiatives in the past. I think it's totally, when you're talking about spending less than $1,000, worth doing something like this, but you have kind of lost control of it because it's hosted on the Google service. And so the next thing we'll be talking about is 3D Vista, which is a more comprehensive system. Now, we're in a gallery here, and if you click on that painting, this is a hotspot, and audio will start, which we don't necessarily need to hear, but there's a description going on in this particular thing. If we quit out of that painting, the camera will continue to rotate in this particular case. I don't particularly like this camera rotation business, but whoever designed this tour liked it. And then we click on one of these spaces. and you can maneuver your way into the gallery. And again, you can walk around, you can get a sense of what it's like to be here. So let's just pause a moment, and I'm going to catch up with 3D. Whoa. Um, Vista. Okay, so I'm going to, sorry, stop sharing, and if you can reconnect me again with the okay, so we've been through these. So what I wanted to say first about 3D Vista is, and this is carries on from what I said about the street view. Street view, you basically either commission someone to take photographs or you submit your own photographs and you give them to Google. And you've kind of lost control of whatever it is you've put there, because you're not hosting it. You really, if you created all the work yourself, maybe you can purpose it later. But the main company in the field of virtual tours is called Matterport, and it's a fabulous system technologically. You can get their camera or use other 360 cameras, and they will stitch these tours together to make these nice 360-degree images. You can put hotspots in, like you just saw in that 3D Vista example. But the main thing I have to stress with you is you don't have access to the files that were used to create that tour. So why I like 3D Vista is that you're buying the software or you're commissioning someone who's familiar with this software, and you retain all of the elements that make it work. And I find of the various software that does this, most of it is cloud-based, but this is one where you actually pay for an application that's on your computer, and you build, or the person you hire builds the tour, and you have something that you own and can repurpose at a different time. So I've shown you the first gallery. The second example that Nancy can show now is the Science Museum. Now here you can see all of the content of the Science Museum is basically, if we can go to the example of we're starting out in a sort of, we can go here. And now let's go to it'll go back to the fish, the pescas and mariscos. This is a Spanish product, and the example I'm giving you is a Spanish science museum. But if we look at the menu on the left, the map, we'll select it's the third one over on the top there, that I believe, yes. And so now you're in a specific exhibit. If you click on the walls, you can bring out any of the exhibit media. Close that, you keep turning, there'll be another one. You can see the fish there. There's another one. You scan a little bit more, and you'll see that there's a video embedded into the thing, which can be called up. And, basically, you can port all of the informational content of a tour into a virtual media product that can be seen by anyone, anywhere. And one other little thing, if we can quit out of this and then go to the next example, is Yeah, let's quit this to the next, this one. Here we go. This is a commercial use case, but what I like about it is you can embed people talking in a virtual space. I mean, so you can put a docent or curator type or subject expert into a scene. And so if you click on this guy here, you can see that he should start talking about the patio. Click on about the patio. Yeah. We don't have audio here, but this man is talking. This man is in the space. If Nancy turns the camera around, he stays in position. He's not just an overlay. He is embedded into the 3D environment. And I think there's a lot of possibilities that people can have for this kind of annotation by a human that you can relate to in a space. So I think the possibilities for these kind of tours is really endless. I mean, in terms of imagining, and in this particular case, if you've put a lot of effort in creating an exhibition, this is a way that you can preserve it for other people to use after the show is closed. So the next and final chapter of what I want to talk about is the 3D objects. And I guess if we can drive, how do I? Again, I'm having problems switching back and forth between my copy of the PowerPoint. Here. So 3D objects. And I think this is the future of how a lot of people will understand and interact with museum content and imagery. And people were just really beginning to think of all of the possible use cases for 3D objects and how they can be put into either in a museum setting as a way to allow visitors to examine something that they physically could not hold because it will destroy the object. I mean, you can just do that. You can have the real object and then the 3D model next to it. Or you can think of ways of showing things that are, otherwise contextualized in a virtual space. And you can just do things that, as I say here, are not possible in real life. So what I want to do is show 4 different types of objects that were scanned by a company that is an expert in the field. And they're called direct dimensions. And they've provided 4 examples. And if we can start with the straw hat, see why certain things might cost more and what you're talking about in terms of sort of digitizing a collection and turning them into 3D objects. So if Nancy could show the hat, that would be great. Okay, so now the next one, this is about $500 worth of work because just one type of scanning was needed to store the hat, to record the hat. The next object is a sewing machine. And I just love looking at this thing and the way that you can sort of zoom into different aspects of it. And this is something that would cost between $500 and $1,000 to scan. In particular, I like if you can zoom into where the sewing needle actually meets the fabric, if it was in there. So let's look at then there's a jacket. The materials like jacket pose more of a challenge from a recording standpoint. So you have, in looking at an object like the jacket, you're talking about capturing the shape, the actual volume of the thing, but you then have more subtle textures that have to be recorded to make it an actual sort of more accurate rendition of the object that's being scanned. So something like this might cost between $1,000 and $2,500 to record. And then finally, the fourth example is the guitar that was Jose Feliciano's guitar. And what you're looking at here is requiring several different types of scanning, because what you have is the reflection, and we're managing to capture the reflectiveness of the surface while still preserving the accuracy of the recording. And certain things in this case, like the guitar strings, were replaced with CAD, that is the computer generated images of the guitar strings. But to me, something like this as an object is really exciting, because I could imagine putting it into a virtual setting where the user, by clicking on the strings, would hear the sound of the guitar. You could pang the guitar, you'd hear that sound, and you could really make it an interesting experience. So that is the fourth example. And I think if you think about using objects like this in ways that you can think of to create virtual exhibitions, whether they're grounded in a actual virtual space or just shown as individual things within the context of, let's say, a website, there's a lot of possibility here. And so that is what I have for now. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. And we have quite a bit of time for questions. So if you have any that you're thinking of as we go through this process, feel free to place them in the chat area, and one of our student technology fellows or Museum Learning Hub leadership team will get those over to us. So just a reminder to put those in the chat for us. So I guess starting off, Michael, it's interesting, and I think some themes in your presentation suggest that elegant and simple really is the way to go with many of these things. And with the face of COVID, museums are really moving to hosting these things in a digital space, not just for visitation purposes, but maybe for other purposes. You know, they want to have that on there for donors. They want to have it on there for other content. So with that in mind, some of our questions are concerning, you know, cost versus benefit when upgrading to some higher level equipment. Can you talk a little bit about how you determine when it's best to find a professional? What can you do on your own time, and what types of equipment do you typically use for these types of projects, whether they be Google Street View or 3D Vista or something else?
Well, you know, I think the cost benefit really has to do with what is your in-house capability in terms of people. You know, at the simple level, what the Broad does, that's just an iPhone on a tripod. I mean, that is as minimal as you can get. Now, not everyone has the sort of the eye candy, as it were, to push a thing through, but I think it's the idea that they did is making it short and just annotating certain objects within the gallery made it an interesting experience. They're not even allowed to record those shows because they don't have the rights to turn them into a video program. So that's why it has to be done as a live show. We got it because this is just a closed group of people, so that I was able to show it in that context. So I would say when you get into 3D Vista, it's not a very expensive program. If you're talking professionally, it's 500 euros. But you do need someone who is either like familiar with After Effects, I mean, I'm just throwing out programs of similar complexity. They're not, it's, that you would have to have someone who is confident in their computer skills. And I think they could pick up something like this. With 3D Vista, people can use regular 35 millimeter cameras and just create, a circle, and then it gets stitched together, or they can use 360 cameras, such as the Insta 360 makes a series of cameras, and I can have, put them in the list of resources related to this particular broadcast, for people to look at, and record them themselves. But I think for a lot of people, you just want to turn it over to a professional who knows how to do it, and not and concentrate on getting the result you want. I think what was said by Direct Dimensions when I was talking to them about the 3D objects, and it really applies to any kind of digital media, it's about the level of effort required to do what you want to do. So you can start off, we're going to see the room. Well, okay, we see the room, we see the objects in the room. Do we want to see every single work from a perfect perspective? Do we want to have that a capability? So, now you're adding stops. So you can't just have a scene of the room. You have that frustration. Oh, I see that work of art over there, but because it's digital and because you only got so many hot spots that you can visit, you can't get a really nice view, a direct view of that object, be it a sculpture, artifact, or painting. So now you're adding levels is that the cat? Um, so basically, that adds more stops, that adds more time, that adds more effort. Do you want to annotate each thing? Do you want to have like equivalent of labels, wall labels, be able to pop up for each thing? All of these are layers, which are nice, but in and of themselves, they're not particularly difficult. But if you scale that over a couple of rooms, now what was a very simple, project has now become, instead of 2 or 3 days, a week or 8 days. And therefore the cost goes up, whether it's internal billing or, hiring someone from the outside. To me, those are the choices that you want to make, not just about the equipment that you use to make it. I think if you define what you're trying to say or do, or what's important to communicate, then you figure out what you need to do to achieve that, and you can back into, well, this is going to require this amount of people to know how to do these kinds of, activities. We need people who will write the copy for the notes, people who will know how to play. It just, when it's about defining what you want to try and do, is what dictates everything else. I hope that's a helpful answer.
I think so. And with that in mind, that leads into a little bit of our next question, which is based around the planning process. This is specifically relating to virtual reality and augmented reality experiences. Mm-hmm. And as you think about these things, of whether you're doing it in-house or doing it with an outside vendor, perhaps, how does that planning process differ for virtual reality and augmented reality versus more traditional media means?
Well, a lot of people in AR and VR come from technical backgrounds, related to their craft. Because I come from a video background, a media background, for which to me AR and VR is just another tool, I kind of think of it in a very much the same way. It's you're applying a tool to a use case. I mean, with AR and VR, they're two very different considerations. Augmented reality is best done on the site. I think virtual reality is something that is really extending museum content off-site. I think it's, except for maybe a few things, the idea of a museum having to support virtual reality on premises is counterproductive. You want people to come to experience your location and interact with that space. Putting a visitor in a headset and taking them away isn't, I mean, it's not impossible, but it to me, it's a lot of effort is involved in not supporting what you have there. Whereas augmented reality is maybe giving people new tools to experience greater depth and levels of an object. You can take the wall labels away. You can have labels in multiple languages that, explain what an object does. You can, depending on the sophistication of the technology you're using, show an object in a context that it was in that you could not see in the gallery space. So there are a lot of things there that I think are exciting. And again, I think VR is really, and you can think of AR also in terms of sound. You can do sound design that's spatially located, that could make a room come to life. That's very exciting. And virtual reality, I think, is a way to take your content and make it reach other people in a very impressive way, in a way that you can do with that transcends just like a screen experience. Because when you're in virtual reality, you feel like you're in the place that you're experiencing, that the media is about.
So it sounds like our Nancy might have a slide that would suggest a visual prop for this. Nancy, could you put that up on the screen? Okay, we'll see if we can get that here. Okay, and I think this was in terms of your video on Lake Baikal. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about some of that 360 video and what components were involved in that planning process?
Sure. This was done for the money that I was able to get from Google, was to do 3 Google expeditions. And as people in the audience may be familiar, Google expeditions were widely promoted and distributed as a free resource to schools around the country. And they offered these viewers that were either the cardboard where you put the phone in, or Vista, the old slide, what was it called? The slide viewer. They had a version of this Google Cardboard. And basically, you could see up to about 8 360-degree stereo views of a particular subject. And so they did national parks, they did the Air and Space Museum, and we were commissioned to do 3 about Russia. One I did for the museum, the Memorial Museum of Cosmonautics, which I really liked and thought turned out very well. And another, which was about the reason I really wanted to go to Russia and what's in the background of this slide, which is Lake Baikal. And so we did, these 360 slides. They then had hotspots put in them, which were annotated and were a great resource for schools that wanted to show, students or get them involved in that subject. And the teacher had a tablet and could see where the students were looking at any one time on the 360 image. The thing is, Google abandoned the Google expeditions last June, and there are several companies that are trying to, take those works and repurpose them. But a lot of schools are kind of pissed off because they invested money in the players for using these Google expeditions, and they're no longer available. I know there's a company in England that's distributing them, and I know Google arts and culture took for example, the one we did of the Museum of Cosmonautics, and that's on their website. Another reason not to completely fall in love with a technology company that you cannot guarantee will stay in love with whatever it is that they're selling today in 5 years' time. So, but in terms of planning, and I would say when you're thinking about 360 and immersive 3D, there are two types of VR. There's the type that was done that you see the slide of. That camera is capturing a 360-degree photographic image. It's a totally immersive photographic image, but there's a single node that you can't get closer or further away from anything that you're seeing. So the experience is immersive, but you can't interact with it. And I think that has some limitations in terms of storytelling. It's harder to tell a lot of facts. You have to slow the editing down very much because it is so immersive. People want to look around. There are a lot of types of storytelling where if you want to give a lot of information fast, you're better off with traditional 2D information. There's another type of VR, which is more like a video game. It's where you actually build the 3D world that you're in, which is sort of what we did for the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. We recreated the studio in which Jackson Pollock at first, and then after he died, Lee Krasner then in a different, it was the same space, but had been changed, painted in. And in that, you can actually move around in the space. You can look at things, you can move, you can, put your hand through a paint cart, which is where she had stored all her paints. You build a virtual world like a video game world, but you can move around in it. And that to me is particularly exciting, but it's also fairly expensive to try and create. And, it depends on what it is that you're trying to tell. To give someone a sense of a place, what it's like to be in a rainforest, what it's like to be in a busy street, to have that immersion of being somewhere else, I think 360 video can be very powerful. But it's giving you an impression, and maybe you have to use that together with more traditional media if you're trying to then convey a lot of factual or specific types of information. It's how you combine the media that is best for communicating specifically what the objective or that communication message should be.
Okay, let me take a look at my questions here. So how do you feel about, obviously these are very visual images and tours. How do you feel about the accessibility of all of these tours? Are there ways to incorporate things like visual descriptions, alternative text? Are they good for deaf and blind audiences? Are there ways to make them more accessible?
There are a lot of people working very much on that aspect of what you're talking about. I mean, obviously, I think for hearing impaired people, VR offers all kinds of ways of being able to visually show what's going on. I mean, audio description, you can put in any kinds of titles, any kinds. I mean, it's actually quite an easy, well, not easy. It's feasible to do all kinds of layering of information, both using augmented reality and virtual reality. There is effort required, obviously, to do this, but it's technically quite feasible. I mean, with AR, you can use headphones. I think very soon everything will be in glasses, so that that information just will be overlaid. We're going to have to get used to it. I mean, there are pictures. Obviously, 30 years ago, everyone was reading a newspaper on the subway. Today, same picture, everyone's holding up a phone. In the future, 10 years from now, people will not be holding phones anymore because they'll be getting their information probably through some kind of head-mounted interface. So I think the idea of using augmented reality to, let's say, provide wayfinding for visually challenged people, in the forms of like tones where you know where to go, that is being worked on. And in terms of people who can't hear, to be able to have visual supplements that explain what's happening, as you say, descriptive texts, and again, it can be done in different languages, and I'm sure that will be adopted more. And it's totally, part of what can be done with this digital technology.
And we look forward to seeing how that technology continues to evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
So another question we have, can you comment on feedback from audiences of these 3D presentations or tours? Do people understand, how to work these? Do we see that feedback? Do they really click on the hotspots all the time, or are they just kind of, walking through them, so to speak?
I would say I've seen a lot of exhibitions where I don't know if, I find that in many tours, I can't get the view of the object that I really want to see as much as I'd like, that they were made by people who didn't have an appreciation for the subject matter. And so they're not hugely successful. Just because it's a virtual tour doesn't mean it will be a successful virtual tour. I think if the purpose is, and I'm thinking of, if the purpose is to preserve what it was like, I mean, I would love to go back to the Armory show, 2010, and see, what it was like to have been in that space. And of course, you can see some of the works that were shown. They're in collections. The Newark Museum has a lot of them. But you never can get a sense of what it was like to have been in that place. What I like is that you can preserve in time what an exhibition was like. And some of the purposes of that might be to think about how it was curated, how the material was presented, and be able to compare that in 5 or 10 years' time with how does that fit with how people approach that same subject matter today. I think, if what you're trying to do is tell a story about a particular theme or subject, and you are basically careful about not making it, I mean, again, you have to break the material down so it's short and it's compelling. And I think in that case, you'll have a successful show. I do think that if the comment is a lot of this bogus and not particularly successfully implemented? Yes, I've seen a lot of examples that I don't think, just because it was a 360 tour, was particularly helpful in understanding what went into that show or what the artist was about.
Okay. And we probably have time for one or two more questions before we close out today. So another one of these questions comes from most of the examples that you have shared are from locations with large open exhibit spaces and wide camera angles. So can you comment on the use of 3D imaging in perhaps smaller spaces or more narrow spaces? For instance, like a historic home or a gallery, you know, the equipment, the making that work visually. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in photographic VR, you don't really want to get closer than 5 feet. You know, you have issues with the way you can in 3D zero in on something and make a nice impression. I mean, to me, when you talk about a smaller space, and if there's the ability to scan it and make a 3D copy of it, I think those are gold mines, because you can examine something in great detail without actually going to the space. I mean, if there's an accessibility issue in terms of like climbing stairs to go and visit a particular room in a historic home, if there's wear and tear issues, making a digital twin of that space, to me, offers an amazing amount of potential to be able to examine in great detail. So I think there's a lot of advantages, and the fact that it's small is not a technical hindrance. As I said, with photographic VR, you would just, if it's a really narrow space, then you would have to make such special considerations for recording it and keeping everything sort of sharp and in focus. But in digitizing it, I think you'd have no problem, and it would be really interesting.
Wonderful. Some good words of wisdom. And I think that is all the time we have for questions today. So thank you, Michael. Any final words of wisdom before we let you go for today?
I think I've said everything I'm able to say about this subject at the moment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much again for your presentation and for answering all of your questions. Okay. Once again, thank you everyone for attending today's program, and thank you to our instructor, Michael Owen. If you enjoyed this program, then please do us a favor and share it with your network. Word of mouth is the best way that people hear about us. We really appreciate your participation, and we hope to see you for future programs. Stay tuned to us and upcoming events by visiting our website, museum-hub.org, for more information on upcoming events. So again, some final reminders. Please be sure to visit the forum on our website to ask questions. Again, you'll want to create a login and join that community forum. And lastly, be sure to join us for the next module, for the inspiration session for our audiences and analytics module. Speakers for that will include Arturo Garcia, Manager of Marketing Communications at the Museum of Photographic Arts in San Diego, California, and Emily Robertson, the Marketing Manager at Gore Place in Waltham, Massachusetts. Thank you very much again for joining us this afternoon or this morning, and we hope to see you at a future event. Take care and stay well. Thank you.